The first time my mother-in-law said, "That's not how we do things in this family," I smiled. I shouldn't have. Please watch this video to the end to learn from my story. I had only been married to Mark for 6 weeks. 6 short weeks of learning that love does not protect you from tradition when tradition is used like a leash. They said tradition was about respect. But what they really meant was control. It started small. Emily, a good wife, wakes up before sunrise. I remember that morning clearly. The sky was still dark. My phone said 4:58 a.m. I had gone to bed past midnight after cleaning the kitchen alone. I pushed myself up anyway. I didn't want problems. I walked into the kitchen and found Linda, my mother-in-law, already standing there with her arms crossed. Her lips were tight, like she had been waiting just to see if I would fail. "You're late," she said. "I woke up as soon as my alarm rang," I replied, forcing a smile. She glanced at the clock and shook her head slowly. "In this family, women don't need alarms. Their bodies know." I laughed nervously. I thought it was a joke. It was. Mark's father, Robert, walked in, grabbed his coffee, and sat at the table without looking at me. Mark followed, kissed his mother's cheek, and sat beside his dad. No one asked if I was okay. No one said good morning. Linda handed me a list written on paper, actual paper, folded neatly like it was sacred. "This is what you'll do today," she said. I unfolded it. Clean living room. Wash everyone's clothes. Prepare dinner by 5. No phone during the day. No leaving the house without permission. I looked up slowly. Permission. Linda smiled. Tradition. I laughed again, this time louder. "You're joking, right?" The room went quiet. Mark cleared his throat. "Emily, maybe just try to understand. That's how my mom was raised." Raised? Like a warning. I swallowed my words. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to be the difficult wife. So I nodded. That was my first mistake. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into rules. I wasn't allowed to eat before everyone else. I wasn't allowed to sit while men were standing. I wasn't allowed to question elders. If I tried, Linda would say the same sentence every time. Tradition is bigger than you. One afternoon, my sister called. I hadn't spoken to her in days. I answered quietly in the laundry room. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked. Before I could answer, Linda appeared behind me like a shadow. "Who said you could be on the phone?" I froze. "My sister." She took the phone from my hand and hung up. "In this house, family business stays inside," she said calmly. "That's tradition." That night, I cried silently beside Mark in bed. "Your mom took my phone," I whispered. "She's just strict," he replied, half asleep. "You'll get used to it." That's when I realized something terrifying. He wasn't going to save me. The worst part wasn't the work or the rules. It was the way they smiled while breaking me. At dinner, Robert would say, "Emily, serve the food." I'd stand. Linda would add, "Not like that, slower, graceful. A wife reflects her husband." If I dropped a spoon, she'd sigh dramatically. If I forgot salt, she'd shake her head in disappointment. Once she laughed and said, "We'll train you yet." Train. Like a pet. I began to feel small, smaller every day. But then something happened that changed everything. It was Sunday, family meeting day. Everyone sat in the living room. Even distant relatives came. I didn't know why until Linda cleared her throat. "We need to discuss Emily," she said. "Discuss?" I felt my stomach drop. "She has not fully submitted to our ways," Linda continued. "This can bring shame." One aunt nodded. Another whispered, "True." Robert spoke next. "Tradition allows correction." Correction. I looked at Mark, panic in my eyes. "What does that mean?" He didn't meet my gaze. Linda turned to me. "You will begin fasting twice a week. No talking back, no leaving the house, and you will kneel every morning to greet elders." The room hummed with agreement. I felt dizzy. I didn't agree to this. Linda's smile faded. Marriage means agreement. I stood up. My legs were shaking. This isn't tradition, I said, my voice breaking. This is control. The room exploded. How dare you? Disrespectful. Ungrateful girl. Linda stood slowly and walked toward me. You think you know better than generations? She asked softly. Sit down. Something snapped inside me. No. Silence. I had never said that word in that house. Mark finally spoke. Emily, please. I looked at him, really looked. And I saw fear, not for me, for himself. I sat down. But I didn't submit. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every insult, every rule, every stolen piece of myself. And then, I remembered something Linda had taught me early on. Tradition is everything. If you break tradition, you lose your power. If you follow it, you can use it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Earlier than ever. I knelt. But not the way they expected. I began to learn. I listened carefully. I asked questions politely. I memorized their customs, their words, their rules. Linda smiled again. She thought she had won. She didn't know I was collecting keys. Because tradition has cracks. And once you know where they are, even a locked door can open. That afternoon, Linda announced a family ceremony planned for the following week, one that could only be led by a woman who followed tradition perfectly. She looked at me and said, maybe one day you'll be worthy. I smiled back. Inside, I was already planning my freedom. And they had no idea what was coming next. I nodded when Linda said that. I kept my smile small, respectful, quiet. Inside, my heart was racing. Because that ceremony she mentioned wasn't just any ceremony. I had heard whispers about it since the first week I arrived in that house. Women talked about it like it was sacred. Men talked about it like it was dangerous. It was called the binding. A tradition meant to restore balance when a wife was seen as stubborn. The irony made my chest ache. The next morning, I woke up even earlier than before, not because I wanted to please them, but because I wanted information. I found Aunt Carol in the kitchen. She was one of the quieter ones, the kind who watched more than she spoke. Good morning, I said softly. She looked surprised. You're up early. Tradition, I replied. Her lips twitched just a little. That was the first crack. I poured tea the way Linda liked it. Not too hot, no sugar, cup warmed first. Aunt Carol watched me carefully. You're learning fast, she said. I have to, I replied. I don't want to bring shame. That word again. Shame. She sighed and leaned closer. Be careful, Emily. About what? I asked. She lowered her voice. Traditions don't bend, they break people. I swallowed. Who created the binding? She froze. Then she whispered, a woman. That surprised me. Her name was Margaret. Carol continued. She was abused by her husband's family generations ago. She created the ceremony to protect wives. Protect? But now, I asked. Carol shook her head. Men changed it, power does that. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A woman created the tradition. That meant something. Over the next few days, I became invisible. Not in a sad way, in a powerful way. I moved quietly, I listened, I served, I bowed my head, I followed every rule. Linda beamed. She's finally learning, she told Robert at dinner. Mark squeezed my hand under the table. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I almost laughed. Proud of my silence. The ceremony was announced officially on Friday. Everyone gathered in the living room again. Linda stood in front like a queen addressing her court. The binding will happen this Sunday, she said. Emily will participate. Participate. Like I was a prop. Linda turned to me. You will kneel before the elders. You will swear obedience. Tradition will cleanse your spirit. The room murmured approval. I stood slowly. My heart pounded so loud, I was sure they could hear it. I accept, I said. Linda smiled wide. Mark looked relieved. No one noticed Aunt Carol, staring at me with wide eyes. Sunday came too fast. I wore the dress Linda chose, long sleeves, high neck, heavy fabric. Modesty is respect, she said as she adjusted the collar. The living room was rearranged, chairs in a circle, candles lit, old symbols carved into wood placed in the center. The air smelled like incense and power. I was guided to the center of the room. Kneel, Linda ordered. I did. My knees hit the floor hard. Pain shot through my legs, but I didn't flinch. Linda began the ritual words she had memorized, words she never questioned. Do you submit to the traditions of this family? She asked loudly. I do, I said. Gasps. She wasn't expecting that. Do you accept correction from elders? She continued. I do, I repeated. Robert nodded approvingly. Then came the part they loved most. Do you surrender your will for the harmony of this household? This was it. The room went silent. I lifted my head. I surrender, I said slowly, as tradition commands. Linda stepped forward, smiling. But I wasn't finished. As tradition also commands, I continued, the woman who kneels may speak her truth before witnesses. The room froze. What? Linda snapped. I turned toward Aunt Carol. Is that not correct? All eyes shifted. Carol swallowed hard. It is, she said quietly. Murmurs erupted. Linda's smile cracked. That part is rarely used. But it is tradition, I replied calmly. She hesitated. If she denied it, she would be breaking the very thing she worshipped. Proceed, Robert said gruffly. I took a deep breath. My truth, I said, voice shaking but strong, is that tradition was meant to protect, not imprison. Linda stepped forward angrily. This is not the time. It is, I said firmly. The founder, Margaret, created this ritual to shield wives from cruelty. Shock rippled through the room. I wasn't supposed to know her name. She gave women a voice, I continued, not chains. Linda's face turned red. You're twisting history. No, I replied. You buried it. I stood. Tradition said I could. Gasps filled the room. By tradition, I said louder now, a wife wronged may request release. Mark shot to his feet. Release. I turned to him. Release from control, I said softly. From humiliation, from fear. Linda screamed. This is manipulation. I smiled sadly. It's tradition. Silence fell like a hammer. Robert looked confused. Linda, is this true? She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time, she had no words. The power in the room shifted. Not completely. Not yet. But enough for me to breathe. Enough for me to know. I had stepped onto dangerous ground. And once tradition turns against you, it doesn't stop halfway. The silence didn't last long. It never does when power feels threatened. Linda recovered first. She always did. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and smiled the kind of smile that scared children and silenced rooms. This is exactly why tradition exists, she said calmly. To stop confusion. Confusion. That's what she called the truth. Robert rubbed his forehead. Emily, maybe you should sit. I looked at him. By tradition, I'm allowed to stand until my truth is heard. His mouth tightened. Mark stepped closer to me, his voice low. Emily, please, you're embarrassing everyone. I laughed. Not loud, not rude. Just one sharp breath that slipped out before I could stop it. Everyone, I asked, or just you? The room gasped again. I could feel it now, the shift, not support, not freedom. Fear. Linda raised her hand. Enough, this ceremony is over. She tried to end it. That was mistake number 2. By tradition, Aunt Carol said suddenly, standing up. A ceremony cannot be closed until the kneeling woman finishes. Every head turned toward her. Linda stared like she had been slapped. Carol's hands were shaking, but she kept going. That's how Margaret wrote it. The name hit the room like thunder. Linda's voice dropped. Sit down, Carol. No, Carol said. I stared at her, stunned. She met my eyes and nodded once. Go on. My chest tightened. I spoke again. I request release, I said clearly, from all practices that harm my dignity. Linda laughed sharply. Release means separation. The room buzzed. Mark looked panicked. Emily. Quiet, Robert snapped at him. That surprised everyone. Robert stood slowly. He looked older in that moment, tired. Linda, he said, did we change this? Her eyes flashed. We adapted. For control, he asked. Silence. I saw it then. Linda wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of being seen. She turned to the room. This girl is twisting our ways to escape responsibility. I lifted my hand. Responsibility, I asked. I wake before sunrise, I serve everyone, I obey every rule. I have not left this house alone in weeks. Murmurs. She exaggerates, Linda snapped. Then check my phone, I said. Oh wait, you took it. The room erupted. What? She took her phone. That's extreme. Mark stared at his mother. You did what? Linda's face hardened. Discipline. Robert looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I continued, my voice steady now. I'm not asking to break tradition, I said. I'm asking to restore it. I turned slowly, meeting every pair of eyes. Margaret believed a wife's voice mattered, I said. So do I. Linda pointed at me. You came into this family to destroy it. I smiled sadly. No, I came into it believing love was enough. The room fell quiet again. Robert cleared his throat. If release is granted, what happens? I swallowed. Tradition says the woman chooses, I replied. Reform or departure. Mark's head snapped toward me. Departure. I looked at him. This was the hardest part. Marriage should not feel like prison, I said softly. His eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, I did. Instead, I said, you were always there, you just didn't look. Linda stepped forward, furious. You will not tear my family apart. I met her gaze. You already did. Robert raised his hand. Enough. Everyone froze. I need time, he said. This needs review. Linda's mouth fell open. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing truth, he replied. The ceremony ended without a chant, without applause, without victory, but not without consequences. That night, the house felt different. Doors closed harder, whispers followed me. Mark didn't come to bed. I lay awake, staring into the dark. I had spoken. I had used tradition. But I hadn't won. Because tradition, once challenged, doesn't just push back. It punishes. And I could feel it coming. The punishment didn't come loudly. It came politely. The next morning, Linda knocked on my door with a tray. Breakfast. She had never brought me breakfast before. Eat, she said sweetly. You'll need strength today. My stomach tightened. By noon, the relatives started arriving again. Too many, too quiet, too prepared. I realized then, this wasn't over. They weren't done deciding my fate. Robert called for another gathering. This time, no candles, no kneeling, just faces filled with judgment. Tradition allows elders to deliberate in private, Linda announced, her eyes never leaving mine. Private. Without me. Mark tried to speak, but Linda cut him off. You've said enough already. I was told to wait in the bedroom. Alone. Hours passed. Every sound outside felt like a verdict being written without my name on it. When the door finally opened, Mark stepped in. His face told me everything before his mouth did. "They're saying release has conditions," he whispered. My heart sank. "Conditions?" He nodded. "They want you to apologize publicly, admit you misunderstood tradition, and promise obedience." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. "And if I do?" I asked. Mark hesitated. "Then they'll declare you unfit." Unfit. A word heavy enough to erase a woman completely. I stood up slowly. "They taught me tradition," I said calmly, "and tradition taught me something too." Mark looked confused. I smiled, tired but steady. "Some doors don't need permission to open," I said. "They just need courage." I walked past him. Toward the living room. Toward Linda. Toward whatever came next. Because one thing was clear now. I had already used tradition to find my voice. And whether they liked it or not. Thanks for watching. Kindly drop your comment about this story. And please subscribe to this channel and on the notification for more interesting stories.